The night the police kicked in my door, I thought they had the wrong house. My wife stood behind them, trembling, clutching a blanket like some fragile witness, not the woman who'd just whispered she loved me 2 hours earlier. They said my fingerprints were on the getaway car, that my phone pinged near the scene. I laughed at first. Until I saw the evidence bags. My clothes. My watch. All planted. And her eyes, wide, wet, rehearsed. That was the moment the air went still. No shouting. No begging. Just the quiet, bitter weight of understanding. The woman I built my world around had turned me into her shield. I didn't know why yet, or who she was protecting, but I swore that when I walked free, I'd make every lie she told collapse on top of them both. Before we dive into the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching this from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it helps me connect with you all around the world. They always say you remember the last normal moment before your life collapses. For me, it was the sound of rain on the window, soft, steady, ordinary. I was half asleep on the couch, the TV droning through a rerun, when the pounding started. 3 sharp knocks that made the walls tremble. Not the knock of a neighbor. The knock of authority. When I opened the door, blue and red lights spilled across my front yard like blood and ice. 2 police cruisers. 3 officers. Their faces hard, unreadable. The tallest one, badge shining under the porch light, said my name like a charge sheet. Ethan Carter? I nodded, still groggy. Yeah. What's? You're under arrest for armed robbery and accessory to homicide. At first, I laughed, a short, stupid burst of disbelief. That's not possible. You've got the wrong. But the cold steel closed around my wrists before I could finish. The sound of the cuffs locking was louder than thunder. I looked over the officer's shoulder, and saw her. Claire stood on the stairs in her robe, one hand clutching the banister, the other trembling at her chest. She looked like a ghost of herself, pale, tearful, terrified. Or pretending to be. She didn't speak. Didn't even look at me directly. The police pushed inside, sweeping through the rooms like they already knew what they were looking for. A minute later, one of them shouted from the garage. He came back holding a black duffel bag. The contents spilled across the floor, wads of cash wrapped in bands, a black hoodie, gloves, and a silver revolver. My revolver. Found it behind a toolbox, the officer said. That's not mine, I snapped. I don't even. He cut me off. Your fingerprints are all over it. I turned toward Claire, desperate for her to speak up, to defend me, to say something. But she just stood there, trembling behind the officers, her eyes wide with something I couldn't name. Guilt. Fear. Maybe both. As they led me away, she whispered my name once, softly, like it hurt her to say it, then turned her face into her hands. I thought she was crying. But later, I'd replay that moment and realize her shoulders weren't shaking. She wasn't crying at all. She was hiding a smile. The ride to the station felt endless. I stared at my reflection in the cruiser window, the rain running down like prison bars. I'd never been arrested before. Never even had a parking ticket. But now I was being booked for a bank robbery that left a security guard dead. The interrogation room smelled of burnt coffee and bleach. Detective Ruiz walked in, thick file under his arm, expression like granite. He opened the folder and slid photos across the table, surveillance stills, timestamps, evidence sheets. My car. My plates. My phone pinging near the bank that night. Pretty compelling, isn't it? He said. I could barely breathe. That's not possible. I was home. With your wife? Yes. He smiled faintly and turned a page. Funny thing, she says you weren't. Says you stormed out after an argument about money. That you came back after sunrise. I felt the air leave my lungs. She said what? He shrugged. Seems like she's scared of you, Ethan. Says you've been under pressure, behind on bills. Looks like she was right. He tapped the cash in the photos. You came into a lot of money real quick. My hands clenched. She's lying. He leaned forward. Then why would she lie? That question burned like acid, because I didn't have an answer. Not yet. Hours later, they let me make one phone call. I dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up. Her voice cracked with false concern. Ethan, they said you. Claire, listen to me, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. You know I didn't do this. Tell them. Please. There was silence. Then, faintly, a voice in the background, a man's voice. Calm, deep, too familiar. Who's that? I asked. Click. The line went dead. That was the moment everything inside me went still. Not rage. Not panic. Just a cold, cutting quiet, the kind that makes every heartbeat sound like a countdown. I sat in that holding cell and replayed everything. Her sudden late nights, her guarded phone, the way she avoided eye contact whenever the news mentioned the robbery. All the little things I'd brushed off came together like puzzle pieces snapping into place. She hadn't been scared for me. She'd been scared of getting caught. The next morning, I was formally charged: armed robbery, manslaughter, conspiracy. Bail denied. They called me a flight risk. I called it what it was, a setup. As they led me to the transport van, I glanced through the narrow slit of the holding cell window. The parking lot outside was slick with rain. And there she was, standing beside a silver sedan, head tilted toward that same man's voice I'd heard on the phone. He kissed her cheek before she got into the car. That was the last time I saw her as my wife. From that moment forward, she was something else entirely. My enemy. They kept the room cold on purpose, a kind of institutional winter meant to make your words shiver out of you. Fluorescent hum. One metal chair that rocked if you breathed too hard. A mirror that stared back like an uninterested god. I counted the hairline cracks in the paint until Detective Ruiz returned with a styrofoam coffee and a file that looked heavier than law. He set both down and didn't sit right away. He circled me like a shark that wasn't hungry. Yet. We're past introductions, he said, finally dropping into the chair. His voice was dry, no theatrical thunder, just the soft scrape of inevitability. He opened the file and laid out the skeleton of my new life, bone by bone. First, photos, a string of surveillance stills from the First Midland branch on Grant Avenue. 4 figures, masked. 1 tall, 1 broad-shouldered, 2 wiry. All black hoodies. 1 handgun bright as a coin in bad light. The timestamp on the corner of each frame walked through the robbery minute by minute. 12:47 a.m. door breach, 12:49 hostages on the floor, 12:53 vault corridor, 12:56 a blur at the lobby entrance, a security guard swinging a baton, 12:56 and 22 seconds muzzle flash, 12:56 and 24 seconds the guard crumpling beside the pamphlet stand. No gore. Just the consequence. I felt something seize in my chest and refused to let it show on my face. Next, money, a printout of bank records summarizing the haul. $128,400 pulled from teller drawers in the night deposit bins. Ruiz tapped the figure with his pen. Not enough to fund a life. Enough to ruin one. Then, my life, a map of cell tower pings showing my phone leaping across the grid like it had somewhere to be. At 12:28 a.m., it touched a tower 3 blocks from the bank. At 12:59, another tower near the river. At 1:06, the industrial park by the off-ramp. He slid a glossy photo across the table, traffic camera still, my sedan at the 11th Street light, 12:31 a.m., license plate unambiguous, the rear bumper scar I'd been meaning to fix perfectly framed by fate. You want me to believe someone else was driving your car, Ruiz said mildly. I want you to believe the truth, I answered. Someone else was. He watched me, eyes not unkind, which made it worse. Your wife says you left after an argument about money. She says you've been behind on the mortgage, 2 months. Says you maxed a credit card on car repairs and a new phone. Facts. They weren't wrong. The $1,742 mortgage we were juggling. The $640 emergency brake job I'd cursed about for a week. The phone upgrade I justified because my old one kept freezing. Claire had hated the spreadsheet evenings, me cross-referencing statements, shaving $40 here, $22 there, pretending frugality was a plan. We'd argued, yes. But I hadn't left that night. Ask the neighbors, I said. Ask Mr. Bennett across the street. I shoveled his walkway at midnight when the sleet started. Ruiz made a note without looking down. Bennett's in Florida until March. Of course he was. He flipped to the evidence from my house. The black duffel. The revolver. The bundles of cash with faint red flecks where a stray dye pack had spat, just enough to kiss the edges, not enough to explode. Your prints are on the bag, hoodie, and gun. Clear as prayer. I closed my eyes for a beat. If I'd committed that robbery, why would I bring the bag home? Why keep the gun? Why store it where anyone could find it? Because criminals are arrogant, he said. Or sloppy. Or both. Or because someone wanted you to find it, I said, opening my eyes, pinning him. Someone who knew exactly where to plant it. He didn't smile, but something in his face shifted, the briefest microflinch, a muscle accepting the existence of doubt. He slid another sheet across the table, a photo of a latex fiber snagged on the garage shelf. From a glove found in the bag, he said. Same fiber type, same brand. Your garage, your shelf. My garage, I said evenly, where anyone with the code could walk in. And who has the code? Me, I said, and my wife. The word wife tasted foreign. It sat in the air like a lie waiting to be notarized. He let the silence stretch. He knew the physics of guilt, how quiet makes people fill the room with their own confessions. I filled it with memory instead. Claire's new routine, showering the second she got home, laundry done at odd hours, the scent of a different soap clinging to her wrists, the guarded smile when she said, "Don't wait up." I'd told myself it was stress. I'd told myself we were just tired. I'd told myself 1,000 soft lies because the hard truth was jagged. There was a man with a voice like a locked door and she'd given him a key. Ruiz finally spoke. Let's pretend I agree with you, that someone set you up. Walk me through your night. So I did. Line by line. 10:40 p.m. dishes, news, Claire upstairs. 11:15, the spreadsheet, me at the kitchen table adding $87.50 for groceries into a column I hated. 11:52, text from my coworker Travis about a broken printer I'd fix in the morning. 12:05, I stepped onto the porch, scraped slush off the steps. 12:20, a minute watching the street turn quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you believe the world has a pulse you can hear if you stop pretending. Then the couch. Then sleep. Phone records show your device moved, he said. Care to explain? I swallowed. Explain how a phone moves without me? Spoofing. Cloning. Or someone lifted it while I slept and brought it back before dawn. Even as I said it, I knew how fiction that sounded, but criminals do spoof. They do clone. They do steal and return because framing is a geometry problem. Make the angles line up, the picture looks true. Ruiz tapped the traffic still again. Your car. I keep a spare key in the sun visor, I said, hating how stupid it sounded the instant it left my mouth. Now he smiled, small, clinical. Convenient. Convenient for whoever wanted me where the cameras could see, I shot back. There's no footage of me at the bank. No face. Just a car any half-competent thief could drive. He closed the file. The room seemed to inhale. Here's what I know, Ethan. Someone bled out on a tile floor, and the city expects a name. Evidence says yours. Your wife supports it. The prosecutor loves tidy stories. He slid the coffee toward me. You want to make yours messier? Help me. Give me a reason to pull these threads. I stared at the mirror. My face looked older than yesterday. Start with my wife's statement, I said. Check her timeline. Where she said she was. Who she called. Pull the digital headers. If her phone was on Wi-Fi at home while mine was supposedly across town, that contradiction matters. If a device on our network downloaded an app or updated at 12:40 a.m., there'll be a log on the router. If her car's GPS shows movement, pull it. Toll snapshots. Corner store cameras. She's building a stage, you're admiring the set. Ruiz watched me long enough to weigh the difference between desperation and precision. You an IT guy? Operations coordinator, I said. Midsize manufacturing. I babysit audit trails, delivery timestamps, badge swipes, CCTV loops. I know how lies try to hide in gaps. He stood. For the first time, I saw fatigue in him, not for me, but for the machinery grinding toward a conclusion. I'll run some of that, he said. No promises. He took the file and the room felt larger, colder. Before he reached the door, I said, there were 4 in the footage. The tall one, did he have a limp? Left foot shorter step? Ruiz paused. What makes you say that? In frame 3, I said, his shoulder dips between strides. Habit compensation. He favors the right. I hadn't known I'd noticed it until my mouth announced it. He said nothing, just left. The lock clicked. The hum returned. Hours later, they transferred me to county. As the paperwork was processed, an officer set a clear bin of my personal effects on the counter, wallet, belt, phone and an evidence sleeve. A strip of red lint clung to the phone's case, bright as a warning flare. I stared at it too long. The officer flicked it away without looking, like it was nothing. In the transport van, chains whispering against the floor, I let the cold settle into my bones and counted the pieces I could see. A car I hadn't driven. A phone that had traveled without me. A bag I'd never packed. A gun that felt familiar only because someone wanted it to. A wife who'd timed her terror perfectly and forgotten to fake the tremor in her shoulders. You learn the shape of a setup by its symmetry. My life had been folded around a crime until the edges met, a paper swan with a bullet hole for an eye. I pressed my forehead to the steel wall and made the first rule of my new existence: collect, not rage. Observe, not beg. Every lie has a seam. And I was going to find theirs, stitch by stitch, until the whole costume came apart under the lights. The cell was a gray box with a slit of daylight and a heartbeat of silence between each sound. Metal bed, wool blanket, toilet too close to the pillow. You learn to breathe differently inside, slower, quieter, because anger eats oxygen faster than fear. I marked time by meal trays and guard shifts. The first week felt like an autopsy of my life, everything laid out, everything examined, nothing belonging to me anymore. On the 7th day, my court-appointed lawyer arrived, Daniel Hughes, mid-30s, tired eyes, tie knotted like a noose he'd tied 1,000 times. He sat across from me in the visitation room, folder in hand, voice careful. "Ethan," he said, "we need to go over what they've got. You'll want to prepare yourself." He opened the folder and the room seemed to tilt. Inside were copies of every mistake someone else had dressed me in. Photos, statements, receipts, data pings, the anatomy of a lie carved into official paper. "This," he said, tapping the top sheet, "is the state's evidence stack." The first item, the duffel bag. According to forensics, my fingerprints were found on the handle, on the zipper, and on one of the cash bundles inside. My prints, clean, clear, no smudge distortion. "That's not possible," I said quietly. "I never touched it." Daniel nodded, flipping to the next report. "The bag was dusted at your home, Ethan. No gloves, no contamination, chain of custody logged. They have it airtight." Airtight. I could almost hear Claire's voice in that word, clinical, detached, confident. Next came the revolver. It matched the ballistic rounds recovered from the bank's vault hallway, the same that killed the security guard. But there was something off. The serial number had been filed off recently, fresh abrasions visible in the photo. "They'll say you tried to hide the origin," Daniel explained, "but the metalwork's too clean. Whoever did this knew how to work fast." I stared at the photo of the gun. I remembered seeing it once, my late father's revolver, a .38, passed down and locked in the attic. Claire had insisted I move it to the garage for safety. Now it sat on a courtroom table labeled Exhibit B. The irony cut deeper than the cuffs ever did. Then came digital evidence, the ghost trail. Cell tower records. GPS metadata. My sedan at the traffic light near the bank at 12:31 a.m. My phone pinging in the same area. "Someone cloned the signal," I muttered. "It's not hard. There are apps, spoofing tools, portable relays." Daniel raised a hand. "Ethan, I believe you. But belief doesn't win cases. Proof does. We need something verifiable." His calmness hurt more than Ruiz's suspicion. Ruiz had accused me. Daniel just pitied me. He slid over the witness statements next. 3 names. A neighbor who claimed to hear shouting that night, Claire's voice, saying "don't leave." A clerk from a convenience store near the bank who saw someone matching Ethan Carter's description fueling up his car an hour before the robbery. And the third, Claire herself. I read her words line by line, the neat cursive typed into sterile transcript font. Ethan had been under financial strain. He'd been angry lately. I didn't see him after 11:30 p.m. that night. He said he was going out to clear his head. My chest tightened. I could almost hear her reading that line in court, chin lowered, tears rehearsed. Daniel kept talking, about plea deals, about strategy, but my mind had already slipped somewhere else. Back to our bedroom, the week before the robbery. Claire folding laundry, humming, phone buzzing every few minutes. When I'd asked who she was texting, she said, "Work stuff." But her tone had that defensive lightness that only means one thing, a lie already polished for use. I looked at Daniel. "They missed something," I said. He frowned. "What do you mean?" "If Claire planted the bag," I said slowly, "she didn't do it alone. She couldn't have known about the die pack flex, that means she touched the cash after the robbery. After the die exploded. Whoever handed her that money was there." He scribbled a note. "You think her lover was one of the robbers?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." The words came out too steady, too cold, and I could see it unsettled him. But in that moment, everything inside me crystallized. The confusion burned away, leaving something precise. A theory built from betrayal and evidence. She hadn't just lied to save herself, she'd transferred guilt from the man she loved onto the one she no longer did. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cell hummed with the low breathing of other inmates, the metallic rhythm of footsteps outside. I lay there staring at the ceiling and thought about every document in that evidence stack. If lies can be printed, they can be disproved. Every timestamp, every data point, every signature left residue, and residue leaves trails. In the dark, I whispered to no one, "Find the seams." The next morning, I asked for paper. The guard hesitated, then shrugged. I spent the day drawing diagrams, call logs, tower distances, a timeline of her lies. Lunch came. Dinner passed. I kept writing. By lights out, my bunk was covered in notes. Lines connecting people. Arrows looping around inconsistencies. I wasn't a husband anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was an investigator. And the woman who framed me had just become my first case. Time inside court moves like it does in dreams, slow, heavy, irreversible. By the day of trial, I'd worn the same county issue suit 3 times. Daniel adjusted my tie with the weary grace of a man straightening a noose. When the clerk called People v. Ethan Carter, the wood paneling swallowed my name whole. The prosecutor, Margot Lynn, spoke with perfect diction. "The evidence will show," she began, "that the defendant planned and executed the armed robbery of First Midland Bank, resulting in the death of a security guard." Every syllable clicked into place like teeth in a zipper. The jury nodded as if hypnotized. Detective Ruiz went first. Photos flashed, the $128,400 in stained bills, my sedan at 12:31 a.m., the gun, the bag, the fingerprints. He recited procedures, chain of custody, lab results, each one a nail. Daniel's cross tried to pry a few loose. "Did you seize the home router?" he asked. "No." "Did you test Mrs. Carter for dye residue?" "No." "Any unidentified prints on the bag?" "Partial. Non-usable." The answers stacked like bricks. The wall kept growing. Then came Claire. She glided to the stand in a dark blazer, hair pulled back, wedding ring conspicuously absent. Margot's tone softened, all sympathy. "Mrs. Carter, how was your husband's behavior that week?" "Different," she said. "Distant. Angry about money." "And the night of January 14th? "We fought around 11:30. He stormed out. I didn't see him until morning." Her voice quivered in just the right places. The jury leaned in, mistaking choreography for truth. When Daniel rose, the temperature changed. "Mrs. Carter, your call logs show 2 outgoing calls at 12:14 a.m. and 12:37 a.m., correct?" "Yes." "To the same number?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Would you tell the court whose number that is?" Margot objected, sustained, but the pause had already spoken. Daniel shifted tactics. "Did you ever ask your husband to move his father's revolver from the attic to the garage?" "I don't recall." Detective Ruiz testified you did. Her eyes flicked to the gallery. There, in the second row, sat a man in a charcoal suit with shoulders too broad and a left shoe that tapped unevenly on the floor. The same imbalance I'd noticed in the robbery footage. My pulse thudded once, hard. Margot ended the day with the cell tower expert. Triangulation. Sectors. Radii. Science is scripture. Daniel tried to unthread it, but the jurors looked dazed by the math and comforted by the charts. Facts make better lullabies than doubts. After closing arguments, the judge's charge to the jury lasted 12 minutes. Deliberation took less than 3 hours. When they filed back in, I knew the answer before the foreman spoke. Guilty on all counts. The words didn't echo, they absorbed everything else. Claire pressed a tissue to her mouth, eyes glistening for the cameras. The man in the charcoal suit rested a steadying hand on her shoulder, his limp hidden by the L carpet. The judge thanked the jury for its service and turned to me. "Sentenced to 25 years to life," he said, like reading a date from a calendar. Daniel whispered something about appeals, but the gavel drowned him out. As deputies cuffed me, I looked once more toward the gallery. Claire met my eyes for half a heartbeat, not guilt, not pity, just calculation. Then she looked away. They led me through a side door into a hallway that smelled of wax and winter air. Cameras flashed behind us, the door closed, silence swallowed everything. I felt the weight of the verdict settle, cold and exact. But underneath it, something harder began to form, a purpose that pulsed where hope used to live. 25 years, they said. I counted the numbers differently, 1 year to study the evidence, 1 to find the limp, the rest to build the kind of truth that kills careers. They thought they'd buried me under paper. They'd only given me time to sharpen the blade. Prison is built to erase sound. The gates close with a hiss that feels permanent, and the world outside dissolves in that metallic sigh. I arrived at Greenwood Correctional Facility just after dusk. Chain on wrist, chain on ankle, chain between. The corridor smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage. I'd been processed, photographed, stripped of name and given a number that began with an 8. Numbers don't beg for appeal. The cell was smaller than the interrogation room that had ruined me. Steel cot, gray blanket, a sink polished by decades of despair. My cellmate, Rico, barely looked up when the guard shoved me inside. "Keep your side clean," he muttered, rolling back to sleep. He'd been down 15 years on a weapons charge and had the patience of concrete. For the first month I existed in fragments: breakfast bell, count, yard, lights out. I learned that eye contact was a language here, and silence was its grammar. You speak too quickly, you lose currency. You listen, you earn safety. I listened a lot. Every evening, I replayed the trial in my head like an editor cutting a film. The limp in the charcoal suit. The 12:14 a.m. call. The dye pack that never touched my hands. I held each image until it hurt. Memory became my notebook. Rico eventually started talking. "You the bank guy," he said one night, lighting a cigarette rolled from pages of the facility handbook. "Whole block saw the news. Wife sold you out, huh?" I said nothing. He chuckled, smoke curling toward the light. "Good. Don't confirm, don't deny. But if you're innocent, use your time. This place got more phones than Verizon. You want something looked up, I know a guy in laundry who knows a guy in admin." He paused. "Cost stamps. Or favors." Information in prison was a market. I traded legal memos for stories, stories for connections. Within weeks I'd mapped the hierarchy: who cleaned the offices, who handled mail, who ran the contraband circuit. The same system that punished truth could also move it. During legal aid sessions, I requested every scrap of discovery the public defender hadn't bothered to pull. Case photos, witness statements, digital extracts. The clerk sighed but complied. Bureaucracy, when pushed correctly, becomes a key. 3 weeks later, I had the first delivery, a thick brown envelope labeled defendant's copy. I spread the pages across my bunk while Rico snored. There, buried in the metadata logs, was what I'd been waiting for: a digital footprint from Claire's home Wi-Fi router ***, timestamp 12:42 a.m. The IP lease had been renewed by a device labeled CL phone. Her phone. At the exact moment my phone supposedly pinged 3 blocks from the bank. 2 devices, 2 locations, 1 lie. I felt the old world tilt back toward balance for the first time in months. But evidence alone meant nothing. I needed validation, someone outside who could extract that router file officially. I wrote a letter to Daniel, my lawyer, marking the line in red ink: request forensic copy of Carter home router logs, proof of stationary device during robbery window. I mailed it and waited. Weeks passed. No reply. Prison time doesn't move, it drips. I spent my days in the library, reading case law, memorizing precedents on false testimony, spousal privilege, digital tampering. Knowledge was armor. At night, I trained my mind to slow its pulse, to watch rather than react. Anger had gotten me here, patience might get me out. One afternoon, during mail call, a thin envelope slid under my door. Daniel's handwriting: "We'll talk next visit. You were right about the Wi-Fi." That single sentence felt louder than freedom. Proof existed. It just needed air. Later, Rico asked what I'd gotten. "Hope," I said. He laughed. "Dangerous currency, brother. Spend it careful." Still, hope multiplied. Through Rico's network I met Marla, a clerk who filed tech maintenance orders for the administration building. For 2 packs of cigarettes and a favor owed, she passed me a printout of visitor logs. Claire had come to see Detective Ruiz 2 days after the verdict. Not the prosecutor, Ruiz. The same man who'd sworn the evidence was airtight. Whatever they'd discussed wasn't official, there was no recorded statement. Just a 20-minute meeting marked personal. That night, lying on the narrow cot, I stared at the ceiling vent and realized the seams were widening. A crooked detective, a wife maintaining contact, a lover with a limp. The system that caged me had left fingerprints of its own. When lights went out, I whispered into the dark, not a prayer but a schedule. Step 1, prove the router log. Step 2, link the limp. Step 3, show them what justice looks like when it stops being polite. Rico stirred, half awake. "You talk in your sleep, man." "I'm just writing," I said. "In your head?" "In stone." The guard's flashlight swept the corridor, a brief flare of white. The shadows folded back around us. I closed my eyes and saw the courtroom again, the man's uneven stride, Claire's rehearsed tears, the jury's relief at a story too neat to be true. They'd think I was broken now, another file number fading in concrete silence. But they'd mistaken stillness for surrender. Stillness is just the moment before the storm learns its name. Prison doesn't give you peace, it gives you time, and time is sharper than any blade. After Daniel confirmed the router log, proof that Claire's phone had stayed home at 12:42 a.m. while mine supposedly drove toward the bank, I knew there was more. 2 calls. 12:14 a.m. and 12:37 a.m. the missing pieces. When Daniel arrived the next week, his face looked older. "We traced the number," he said through the scratched plexiglass. "Belongs to Marcus Hale." "Hale," I repeated. "Who's he?" "Private security consultant," he said. "Former military. Contracted to train staff at First Midland Bank 3 months before the robbery." My stomach tightened. "And?" "He walks with a limp. Left knee, old surgery." That was it. The limp. The masked man in the footage. The call times. The access. Claire's lover had a name. That night, I stared at the concrete ceiling, feeling something dangerous return, not hope, but focus. The kind that cuts. 2 days later, I made a deal with Rico, my cellmate. He ran information trades inside. "Find me a way to get a message out," I said. "Clean. No guards." He smirked. "What's in it for me?" "Truth," I said. "And a carton of smokes." By morning, I had a smuggled phone call, 1 minute on a prepaid line that moved through the block like contraband. I called Travis, my coworker from the plant, the only man who ever asked about my trial without flinching. "Look up a name," I said. "Marcus Hale. Security contractor. Connection to First Midland Bank." He didn't even hesitate. "You got it." 3 nights later, a letter arrived through legal mail. Inside was a printout from a corporate event site. Hale, tall, square-jawed, knee brace barely visible beneath his suit. Travis's note was short: he trained the Grant Avenue branch on vault security in November. He also handled camera coverage and blind spot assessment. I exhaled slowly. He'd designed the shadows he later used to hide in. Travis's follow-up hit harder. 8 days after the robbery, Hale paid down $25,000 on his mortgage. The deposit was untraceable cash. Not a coincidence, a trail disguised as relief. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. The world hadn't framed me by accident. Claire had loved him enough to destroy me, and Hale had loved money enough to let her. But to prove it, I needed more than connections. I needed evidence that spoke in a language even liars couldn't twist. That's when Marla, the admin clerk who ran internal mail, slipped me a folded note in the library. "Your wife's been visiting the courthouse," she said. "Twice. And not for you." Inside her note was a copy of the visitor log: Claire Carter, meeting with Marcus Hale, both signed in the same hour, listed as consultants. That was after my conviction. They weren't hiding their alliance anymore. That night, I started mapping everything on the wall beside my bunk: torn notebook paper, pencil lines, names, timestamps. Claire at the center. From her, 3 arrows: Hale, calls, money, bank access. Ruiz, courthouse meetings. Me, the perfect fall guy. When I was done, the wall looked like a nervous system of betrayal. I wrote to Daniel again: subpoena Hale's financials. Focus on the $25,000 mortgage payment. If dye residue traces appear in the serials of the seized cash, we've got him. I underlined the last line twice: he's the shooter. She's the cover. 2 weeks passed before his next visit. "You're right," he said quietly. Mortgage payment came from a cash deposit. No traceable source. We also found Hale's name in the city's security registry. He ordered camera upgrades for Grant Avenue 2 months before the heist. I felt the edges of my mouth twitch, not a smile, but something close. "He built the blind spots," I said. Daniel leaned forward. "We need someone outside the system. A journalist. Someone who can expose it publicly before they bury us with procedure." "Someone credible," I said. "Someone the DA can't dismiss." He nodded. "There's one, Nora Bell, investigative reporter. She's been chasing corruption in the department for years. If we give her the right paper trail, she'll listen." I met his gaze. "Then give her a reason to believe in ghosts." When Daniel left, I sat on the cot, tracing the cracks in the ceiling with my eyes. They connected like veins, crooked, endless, alive. I realized I'd stopped thinking of this as revenge. This was an audit. Every lie had a timestamp, every betrayal a transaction. Somewhere outside, Claire was probably sleeping beside the man she helped save. But she didn't know that her perfect story had already started leaking through the seams. She thought prison had broken me. It hadn't. It had refined me. And when I finally stepped back into the world, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I'd just turn on the light. The first rule of prison survival is simple: never let anyone know you still have something to lose. The second is harder: never let anyone see you working to get it back. For months I'd been moving information like contraband, letters disguised as legal drafts, questions hidden in polite sentences. And then, one afternoon, Daniel said 7 words that changed the gravity of my cage. She wants to hear your story herself. Nora Bell. Investigative journalist. Her articles had torn down mayors and made detectives vanish from payrolls. If anyone could pierce the wall between truth and procedure, it was her. But she didn't visit right away, she sent a letter first. Ethan. I don't believe in villains or victims, only evidence. Send me what can't be ignored. If I can verify it, I'll publish. If I can't, we both stay ghosts. N. B. Her handwriting was sharp, no wasted curves. I stared at the page for an hour, then began building what I called the leak. It started with 3 exhibits, copies Daniel had smuggled through attorney mail. Exhibit A, the router log showing Claire's phone home at 12:42 a.m. Exhibit B, the call records between her and Marcus Hale, 12:14 a.m. and 12:37 a.m. Exhibit C, the mortgage payment confirmation, time-stamped 8 days after the robbery, matching the same amount of untraceable cash that disappeared from the vault. I organized them like a prosecutor: timeline, motive, access, money. Then I wrote a summary online paper, my handwriting steady, detached, factual. No please. Just structure. I ended it with one sentence. If you follow the die, you'll find the truth. Daniel mailed it under privilege protection. After that, silence, heavy, endless. Weeks passed. Then a guard whispered at mail call, "You're famous now, Carter." I thought he was mocking me until I saw the folded newspaper tossed onto my bunk. Page 3, security consultant under investigation for possible role in First Midland robbery. Nora hadn't named me. She didn't need to. She'd named Hale, outlined the suspicious mortgage payment, and cited newly surfaced digital inconsistencies in the conviction of a former operations coordinator currently serving time. The city had questions. The DA's office had panic. By the next morning, the warden called me to his office. "You know anything about this?" he asked, tapping the article. "Only what I read," I said. He stared at me like a man trying to see if a fire had already started. It had, and not just in the press. 2 days later, the Department of Justice's Integrity Division filed a request to re-examine evidence in my case. Ruiz, the detective who'd once sworn everything was airtight, was now cooperating. Rumors spread fast through the block. "Bank guys getting out," someone whispered. But freedom wasn't the goal, not yet. Truth had to land harder than that. I wanted Hale and Claire to watch it happen, piece by piece, on the same news feeds they'd used to rehearse my guilt. Nora sent another letter, this time direct, no formalities. "He's sweating. Hale's company froze his accounts this morning. Anonymous tip led to forensic analysis, red dye particles found in a safety deposit he opened a week after the robbery. Lab confirmed match to First Midland packs. I'm running the follow-up in 48 hours. You ready for what comes next?" I was. I'd spent too long studying silence, now I was ready for noise. The next article hit like thunder. Inside the frame, how a security expert and a banker's wife engineered the perfect scapegoat. Nora didn't just tell the story, she dismantled it. She published the call logs, the bank records, the internal memos showing Hale had designed the camera blind spots. She even mentioned Claire's post-trial courthouse visits, quoting an anonymous source who said they'd met Detective Ruiz off the record. By nightfall, every local news station had the same headline: "Wrongfully convicted man may be innocent." My name was back, but not yet clean, just visible again. That visibility drew pressure. Ruiz broke first. Under questioning, he admitted that Mrs. Carter cooperated extensively and that Hale had assisted in evidence recovery. Translation: the Foxes built the henhouse. The DA's office suspended him pending investigation. Hale went missing. Claire released a statement through a lawyer, claiming shock and betrayal. I almost laughed. The performance had simply changed scripts. Inside, the guards treated me differently now, more careful, less sure. Rico grinned. "Told you, man. Truth's got a smell. Once people get a whiff, they can't pretend they don't." But I didn't feel victory. Not yet. Hale was out there, running, and Claire was still hiding behind confusion. I wanted accountability, not sympathy. I wanted them seen. That night, I lay awake, light flickering through the bars, and thought of something my father used to say when I was a kid fixing engines: pressure reveals leaks. He was right. Hale's perfect system, his clean exit, his silent partner, was finally cracking under pressure. And for the first time since that night of flashing lights and cold steel, I could feel air again. Not freedom, not yet, but air. The kind that smells like the start of a storm. The warden called me to the small interview room that morning. A camera glowed red above the door, a reminder that every word inside belonged to the state. Daniel and Nora waited across the table, Daniel with another of his folders, Nora with a digital recorder wrapped in a press credential. She'd traded headlines for paperwork these last few weeks, helping the federal investigators who were finally paying attention. Good news first, Daniel said. The Department of Justice has filed a motion for evidentiary review. Your conviction's being re-examined. Nora leaned forward. But they need the chain sealed. If you testify remotely, under oath, it keeps the process clean. No leaks this time, just light. The word light hit like a heartbeat. For 2 years, everything had happened in the dark, hidden motives, blurred footage, fabricated prints. Now the same system that had buried me was preparing to exhume its own mistakes. They briefed me on what was coming. Hale had resurfaced, lawyered up. The mortgage deposit had been matched to cash from the bank by dye trace, the lab confirmed the chemical signature. Detective Ruiz, already suspended, had agreed to testify for immunity. He admitted Claire had approached him after the robbery, terrified and persuasive, insisting I'd turned violent. He'd fast-tracked a warrant, planted the revolver where she said I'd kept it, never asking who had given it to her. The lie had seemed tidy. Now it was evidence of misconduct. When the call came from the courthouse, I sat in front of a camera bolted to a steel stand. The judge's voice echoed through the speakers. Mr. Carter, you understand this is a post-conviction evidentiary hearing? Yes, Your Honor. They played the new footage first, security updates Hale himself had filed in the bank's server archives, showing the original layout of cameras before he revised them. The edits left the same blind spots used in the robbery. Then the financial analyst traced Hale's mortgage payment, cash bundles with microfibers of red dye identical to those recovered from the vault. It was clinical, almost boring, but the courtroom murmured as the pattern formed. Facts have a quiet gravity. Next came Ruiz's testimony, a man deflating in real time. I didn't know the money came from Hale, he said. I thought the wife was scared. I didn't check what I should have. No dramatics, just the sound of procedure turning honest again. When Claire took the stand, the feed flickered once. She looked smaller than memory. Her lawyer guided her through the script, stress, manipulation, grief. Then Nora's questions began, precise as a scalpel. Mrs. Carter, did you receive any payment from Mr. Hale? No. Did you contact him on January 14 at 12:14 a.m. and 12:37 a.m.? The pause was long enough to measure in heartbeats. Yes. Why? He told me he could fix things. There it was, admission without prompting, recorded on every outlet covering the hearing live. The trap wasn't a trick, it was truth, cornered. By the end of the session, the judge ordered my conviction vacated pending full review. In legal language, that meant the cage had already cracked. Within 3 weeks, the DA's office moved to dismiss all charges in light of newly discovered evidence. On the morning of my release, the same detective who'd once cuffed me opened the gate without meeting my eyes. Outside, cameras waited, but Nora waved them back. Not yet, she said softly. Let them publish the judgment first. Let the record speak. The record did. The official report named Hale as the principal offender, Claire as an accessory and state witness. Ruiz lost his badge but kept his life. Hale faced federal charges, his limp dragging behind him like a sentence already served. When it was done, Nora handed me a single copy of her article, How Evidence, Not Anger, Freed an Innocent Man. The headline wasn't vengeance, it was correction. I folded the paper once and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Freedom didn't sound like cheering. It sounded like wind moving through an open door, quiet, clean, alive. I looked back at the courthouse and thought of all the rooms where lies had once rehearsed themselves. They were just rooms again now. The truth had reclaimed them. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe without measuring the distance between heartbeats. Justice, I realized, doesn't roar. It whispers until someone finally listens. And this time, it whispered my name. Freedom has weight. It doesn't float you upward, it settles around your shoulders until you remember how to move with it. The morning I walked out, the world looked both smaller and louder, cars too bright, air too wide. I stood just beyond the prison gate while Daniel signed the last paper that made me legally alive again. A guard returned the box that held my old life, wallet, keys, a phone that belonged to another century. The battery was dead, I let it stay that way. The city hadn't changed, only the lens through which I saw it. Coffee smelled like choices, footsteps sounded like promises. Reporters shouted my name, but Nora raised a hand, shielding me from their questions. "No statements," she said. "Let the judgment speak first." We got into her car, and the first 5 minutes of freedom were silence, two people exhaling after years spent holding breath. The headlines followed within hours: conviction vacated. Security consultant charged. Hale's mugshot replaced mine on every screen. The grand jury had indicted him on armed robbery, felony murder, and obstruction. The same evidence once used to bury me was now pulling him into the light. The mortgage payment, the dye traces, the router log, they'd built a bridge from suspicion to proof. Claire's testimony had filled the final gap. She'd taken a plea for perjury and accessory after the fact. Probation. A small mercy in exchange for a larger truth. Nora asked if I wanted to watch Hale's arraignment live. I told her no. Justice doesn't need witnesses, it needs completion. Instead, we drove to the edge of the river where the city lights scattered like coins. I stood there, the cold wind biting through my shirt, and tried to feel something resembling satisfaction. It didn't come right away. What came was exhaustion, then quiet relief, then the ache of everything time had taken. I rented a small apartment above a bakery downtown. Nights smelled of sugar and yeast instead of disinfectant. I worked with Daniel's firm part-time, cataloging evidence for appeals. It felt right, helping others map the same maze I'd escaped. Every case file reminded me that truth isn't self-correcting, it needs caretakers. The state issued a formal apology, typed, notarized, polite. They offered compensation, $1.2 million for wrongful imprisonment. People think that number means closure, but it doesn't. Money fixes paperwork, not memory. Still, I took it. I used part of it to create the Carter Foundation, a small fund for digital forensics training and wrongful conviction support. Nora helped design the mission statement: truth deserves expertise. It became my new job, my penance, and my revenge all at once. Claire tried to call once. The voicemail came through as a flat voiceover static. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't know what else to do. I deleted it halfway through. Forgiveness requires belief, and I didn't know her either. The system had already judged her, my silence would finish the sentence. Months later, during a federal hearing, Hale pled guilty. He stood before the same judge who'd once sentenced me. I watched on a monitor from my office. His limp was more pronounced now, his arrogance gone. When the judge read life imprisonment without parole, he didn't flinch. He just nodded once, like a man recognizing a familiar doorway. Justice, I realized, sometimes limps too, but it arrives. After the verdict, Nora met me outside the courthouse. She had a new piece running that night, The Price of Certainty. It wasn't about me, it was about all the small cracks that let false convictions through. I told her that was the better story anyway. People will forget my name, I said. They'll remember the pattern. She smiled. That's the point. As evening fell, we walked the long block toward the same diner where she'd first shown me the draft of my case file. The neon flickered, the coffee was still terrible, and for the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath my feet belonged to me again. Later, alone in my apartment, I opened the old evidence box one last time. Inside was the folded copy of Nora's first article, the one that had started the leak. I placed it beside my father's watch, the only thing I'd kept through everything, and wrote a single note for myself: silence isn't justice. Action is. Then I turned off the light and let the city breathe through the open window. Somewhere out there, the courthouse clock struck midnight, 12 slow chimes. The sound didn't echo, it landed softly, like closure finally finding a home. For the first time, I wasn't a victim or a suspect or a story. I was just a man who had lived through collapse, and learned how to rebuild from the rubble. Freedom didn't give me back time, it gave me choices. What you do with choices is the only reckoning that matters. After Hale's sentence and Claire's plea, the noise faded. Reporters moved on. My name shrank in headlines. That's when the real work began, quiet, audited, signed in ink. I started with the guard's family. His name was Leonard Pike, 51, 2 kids, a wife who'd stopped watching the news because it kept showing my face when it should have shown his. I asked Daniel to arrange a meeting through their attorney, no cameras, no quotes, just a table in a church basement that smelled like wax and old hymnals. When Mrs. Pike arrived, she kept her coat on, the kind of cold you wear from the inside. I'm not here to ask forgiveness, I said. I'm here to return the attention the story stole from your husband. I slid a folder across the table, $250,000 to endow the Leonard Pike Scholarship at the community college where his daughter planned to study nursing, $100,000 to a trust for their son until he turned 18, $50,000 to the city's Line of Duty Memorial Fund. She didn't cry. She nodded once, practical as a ledger. "Thank you," she said. "Make sure his name lasts longer than the articles." That was the first time in years I felt something lift and not come back down. The Carter Foundation became less of a headline and more of a workflow. We spent $380,000 on digital forensic training, rotating classes for public defenders and pro bono techs, router logs, handset variances, camera parallax, die markers. We funded 3 small labs to image devices without waiting months for state backlogs. We hired a retired chain of custody supervisor to build protocols that could survive courtrooms where stories love to feel inevitable. Each invoice felt like a brick set right. Nora called one evening with a question I'd been circling alone. "Do you want to speak on record about Claire?" The answer arrived without effort. "No. The court has my statement." Still, there were loose ends. Claire requested a victim-offender dialogue, voluntary, mediated, strictly legal. I agreed because accountability without the option of being seen is just punishment wearing nice shoes. We met in a conference room at the Restorative Justice Center, glass walls, soft chairs, a clock that announced each minute without apology. Claire looked smaller, older. She kept touching the place where her ring had been. The mediator read the rules. Then silence. "I told myself it was about fear," she said finally. "That you were changing. That he could fix it." She didn't say Hale's name. "I was drowning." "You set me on fire so you'd feel warm," I said. The words came out level. "That's not fear, that's choosing a story where I die in the last act." She flinched. I have nothing left to offer." "You have testimony," I said. "For other cases Nora's working. Not about me, about the way people trust the neat version first. Put your name on that. Then disappear from mine." She nodded, tears calibrated now to alignment with purpose, not pity. The mediator wrote 2 sentences that turned into a plan. She'd participate in training panels for prosecutors on confirmation bias. She'd donate her fee to the Pike Scholarship. Not redemption. Balance. Papered. Witnessed. I visited First Midland Bank on a weekday morning when the lobby was empty. The manager recognized me and went pale. I told him I wasn't there to haunt the place. I slipped an envelope across the counter, policy suggestions we'd drafted with security experts who didn't moonlight as felons, dual authentication camera audits, independent review of any consultant's alterations, during drill logging kept outside contractor reach, die pack handling logs that include every hand. He shook my hand, relief and shame sharing the grip. "We'll implement," he said. "And we'll put Mr. Pike's photo where people actually look." At home, nights still went quiet in a way that tested the walls. I'd lie awake and count backward, trial days, yard walks, the sound of cuffs closing. When sleep didn't come, I walked to the river and stood where the wind pushed the water into long, careful lines. The city in winter is a metronome, red lights, white breath, the clipped heels of someone late for a train. I felt alive in that rhythm. Not restored, recalibrated. A letter arrived from Ruiz, typed, signed, almost contrite. He was teaching at a small academy now, evidence handling, the boring brilliance of doing the little things right. "If I'd asked better questions, I'd have spared us all this," he wrote. I wrote back 2 lines, "Ask them now. Ask them always." He replied with a photo of a whiteboard covered in chain of custody flowcharts. It looked like a map I wished we'd had sooner. The last thread was legal, not emotional. Daniel filed a civil claim. We settled quietly, $950,000 from the city for investigative failures, $250,000 from First Midland's insurer for negligent security practices. We broke the sum into commitments, $300,000 to expand the Foundation's lab network, $150,000 for a rapid response grant to families during the first 90 days after a wrongful arrest, the most ruinous window, $50,000 to build an open-source tool that scrapes router logs into readable timelines for courts. Money, finally, behaving like truth, documented, traceable, useful. On a late spring morning, Nora invited me to guest lecture at the journalism school. I told them the thing that mattered most: evidence is a film that starts long before the crime. If your first frame is the siren, you miss the story. After, a student asked if I'd forgiven Claire. I said forgiveness isn't a verdict, it's a weather pattern. Some days are clear. Some days it rains where the roof still leaks. That night, I unlocked the office and stood among the boxes, case files, routers, worn-out binders, our little arsenal against the beautiful lie. I placed the last copy of Nora's headline in a frame beside the Pike Scholarship letter. I set my father's watch on top and wound it once. The ticking filled the room like proof, small, regular, undeniable. The reckoning, I realized, wasn't in court or print. It was here, budgets balanced, names honored, practices changed, the quiet discipline of keeping the lights on where shadows used to be. I locked up, stepped into the hallway, and pulled the door shut behind me. The sensor clicked. The corridor light stayed bright. For the first time since the night everything broke, I turned off my own light. And the room did not go dark.